This is one of the most disturbing true crime stories you will ever hear. A 17-year-old girl disappears on her way home, and what happens next is so unimaginable, so prolonged, that even decades later, it still haunts an entire country. This is not just a story about violence, it's a story about power, silence, and what happens when cruelty goes unchecked for far too long. This is the story of Junko Furuta. And before we begin, if you're interested in the psychology behind real crime cases like this, like and subscribing to the channel, because stories like this let you recognize criminal patterns, which will help you protect yourself and loved ones. So let's begin. In late 1980s, Japan, life in suburban neighborhoods like Masato in Saitama Prefecture felt structured, predictable, even safe. It was the kind of place where families trusted the routine. Students went to school, worked part-time jobs, and returned home before dinner. Junko Furuta was exactly the kind of person who fit into that world. She was 17 years old, a high school senior, known by her classmates as kind, responsible, and quietly ambitious. She had good grades, rarely missed school, and worked part-time at a factory, not because she had to, but because she was saving for her future. She had plans, real ones. After graduation, she was set to begin working at an electronics company. She dreamed, like many teenagers her age, of building something stable, maybe even something bigger. Her friends later said she once talked about becoming a singer. But what stood out most about Junko wasn't just her discipline, it was her kindness. The kind that doesn't draw attention, the kind that makes people feel safe around you. And sometimes, that kind of kindness meets the wrong people. At the same time, in another part of the city, a very different story was unfolding. A group of teenage boys had already begun drifting away from normal life. Hiroshi Miyano, 18 years old, was the leader, confident, manipulative, known among peers for his connections to low-level organized crime. The kind of person who understood how to use fear as leverage. Alongside him were Joe Ogura, Shinji Minato, and Yasushi Watanabe, teenagers who had already dropped out of school and begun engaging in petty crimes. Theft, assault, violence, not impulsive mistakes, but patterns. They had a place they gathered, Minato's house in Tokyo, a location that would later become central to everything that followed. It was more than just a hangout. It was a space where rules didn't apply, where boundaries blurred, where escalation became normal. On the evening of November 25th, 1988, those two worlds collided. Junko was on her way home from work. It was an ordinary walk, a familiar route, one she had likely taken dozens of times before. There was nothing to suggest that this night would be different, until it was. Miyano and Minato were riding through the area on motorcycles, not by chance, but with intent. They had already decided what they were looking for, a target. They spotted Junko. Minato approached first. Without warning, he struck her, knocking her off her bicycle and fled. It was sudden, disorienting, and calculated. Moments later, Miyano appeared, not as an attacker, but as a helper. He approached her calmly, offered concern, offered to walk her home. And in that moment, confused, shaken, vulnerable, Junko accepted. It was a decision that changed everything. This is where psychology takes over. Miyano didn't rely on force at first, he relied on trust. He walked beside her, spoke normally, created the illusion of safety. And then he shifted. He led her to a secluded location and revealed the truth. He told her he had connections, that he was part of something dangerous, that resisting him wouldn't just affect her, it would affect her family. Fear replaced confusion. Control replaced choice. That night, Junko Furuta was taken, not just physically, but psychologically. What followed wasn't immediate chaos. It was something far more calculated. Miyano brought her to a hotel. He established dominance, not just through action, but through the message he was sending that he had complete control over what happened then, instead of letting her go. He made a decision that would extend this situation far beyond what anyone could have imagined. He contacted the others. By early morning, Junko was brought to a house in Tokyo, Minato's home. And this is where the situation changed from a crime into something prolonged, something systematic, something that would continue not for hours, but for weeks. At first, there was a structure to how they maintained control. They told her they knew where she lived, that her family could be harmed if she tried to escape. It wasn't just physical confinement, it was psychological imprisonment, and it worked. Next. Meanwhile, back in Saitama, Junko's family realized something was wrong. She didn't come home. Hours passed, then a full day. Panic set in. They contacted the police. But what happened next would complicate everything, because the people holding Junko forced her to make a call. She told her parents she was safe, that she had run away, that they didn't need to worry. It wasn't her voice speaking freely, it was fear speaking through her. And it worked. The urgency dropped. The investigation slowed. Time, the most critical factor in cases like this, began to slip away. Inside the house, the dynamic between the perpetrators evolved. What began as control turned into normalization. They weren't just hiding a crime anymore, they were living alongside it. Friends came and went. People knew something was wrong, but no one intervened. Even individuals within the house, adults who noticed something was off, chose not to act. Whether it was fear, denial, or refusal to get involved, silence became a contributing factor. And this is one of the most disturbing aspects of this case, not just what was done, but how many opportunities there were to stop it, and how none of them were taken. As days passed, Junko's situation became more fragile, physically, emotionally, psychologically. She was isolated, controlled, dehumanized, and yet she endured. She adapted to survive each day, which raises a difficult question. How does someone endure that level of sustained fear? Psychologists suggest that in extreme captivity, the mind shifts into survival mode. You comply. You conserve energy. You focus only on the next moment, not escape, not resistance, just survival. But outside that house, life continued as normal. People went to work, students went to school, neighbors went about their routines, completely unaware or unwilling to see what was happening behind closed doors. By the time December fully set in, the situation inside that house had already crossed a line most people can't even imagine. But what made it even more disturbing was how normal it began to feel to the people involved. Not normal in a healthy sense, but normalized through repetition. Because when something happens once, it shocks you. When it happens again and again, it becomes routine. And that's exactly what happened inside that house. Days turned into weeks, and outside, the world kept moving. People went to work, students went to school, neighbors passed by that same house, completely unaware of what was unfolding behind its walls, or worse, choosing not to ask questions. Inside, Junko's condition, both physically and mentally, continued to deteriorate. Not suddenly, but gradually. And that gradual decline is what makes this case so psychologically disturbing, because it wasn't just a single moment of violence. It was sustained control, sustained fear, sustained isolation. At some point, something changed. What began as control turned into something else entirely, a display of dominance, a need to prove power. The group dynamic shifted. Each individual fed off the presence of the others. And when people operate in groups like this, something dangerous happens. Responsibility disappears. No one feels fully accountable. Everyone becomes part of something bigger than themselves. And that something becomes harder to stop. There were moments, brief ones, where Junko tried to regain control of her situation, moments where she attempted to resist, moments where she likely hoped someone, somewhere, would step in. But those moments were quickly suppressed, not just physically, but psychologically. Because by now, the fear wasn't just about her, it was about her family. The threats made in the beginning about harming the people she loved had done their job. Even if they weren't real, they felt real. And fear doesn't need to be true to be effective. It just needs to be believed. At the same time, something else was happening. The line between crime and daily life had completely blurred for the perpetrators. They weren't hiding anymore. They were functioning, living, going out, and coming back, as if nothing was wrong. And that disconnect, the ability to separate reality from action, is what psychologists often associate with severe emotional detachment. A lack of empathy, a lack of internal boundaries. Even more disturbing, others became aware, not fully aware, but aware enough. There were people who entered that house, people who noticed something was off. Something didn't feel right, but they left. They said nothing. They did nothing. And this is where the story shifts from individual actions to collective silence. Because in cases like this, it's not just about the perpetrators, it's about every moment where intervention could have happened, but didn't. Back in Saitama, Junko's parents continued to live in uncertainty. That uneasy feeling never fully went away. Yes, they had heard her voice on the phone. Yes, she said she was safe, but something didn't feel right. Parents know. Even when they don't have proof, they know. And that feeling that something was wrong never left them. As December came to an end, the situation reached a breaking point. Not because someone intervened, but because the environment itself had become unstable. The individuals involved were no longer acting with any sense of restraint. Control had turned into chaos. And chaos is unpredictable. On January 4th, 1989, everything collapsed, not in a sudden explosion, but in a final escalation, a moment where all the built-up tension, control, and instability reached its peak. Out of severe beating and abuse, Furuta eventually died at 10 a.m. Junko Furuta was gone. Less than 24 hours after her death, Minato's brother called to tell other gang that Furuta appeared to be dead, but even after that, the story didn't end, because what happened next revealed something just as disturbing. Instead of reporting what had happened, instead of stopping, the group made another decision, one that showed just how far removed they had become from reality. They focused on avoiding consequences, not reflecting, not understanding, just avoiding. Her disappearance continued, and for a while, nothing changed until something unexpected happened. In early 1989, law enforcement arrested 2 of the individuals involved, not for this case, but for a completely separate crime. And this is where everything began to unravel, because during questioning, one of them made a mistake, a critical one. He spoke not because he wanted to tell the truth, but because he believed the truth had already been discovered. That single moment changed everything. Investigators followed the lead, and what they uncovered confirmed what no one had been able to prove for weeks. The case that had started as a missing person was now something else entirely. Authorities recovered evidence. They connected the individuals. They pieced together the timeline, and slowly, the full scope of what had happened began to emerge. When the case became public, the reaction was immediate: shock, anger, disbelief. Not just because of what happened, but because of how long it continued, how many people were involved, how many chances there were to stop it, and how none of them were taken. The trial that followed revealed more than just actions. It revealed mindset, patterns, psychology, Hiroshi Miyano was identified as the central figure, the one who initiated control, maintained authority, and influenced the others. The rest followed. Not blindly, but willingly, which raises a difficult question. Where does influence end and responsibility begin? The court recognized the severity of the case, but because the perpetrators were juveniles at the time, the sentences were limited, and that decision sparked national outrage. Many believed the punishment didn't match the scale of the crime, that justice felt incomplete. But beyond the legal outcome, this case left something deeper behind, a psychological impact on an entire country. Because this wasn't just about one victim, it was about the dangers of group mentality, the consequences of silence, the failure to act when something feels wrong, and the cost of ignoring warning signs. Junko Furuta's story didn't end with her. It changed conversations about youth crime, about responsibility, about how society responds to early warning signs. And perhaps the most haunting part of all is this. Nothing about this case was unpredictable. The individuals involved had histories, patterns, warning signs. But those signs weren't taken seriously until it was too late. Junko Furuta was 17 years old when she died. She had a future planned, a life ahead of her, dreams that never had the chance to exist. And while her story is painful to hear, it's important to understand. Because stories like this don't just exist in the past, they serve as reminders that silence can enable harm, that patterns matter, and that sometimes the most dangerous situations are the ones that go unnoticed until they can't be ignored anymore. If this story impacted you, don't just watch and move on. Share it. Drop your thoughts in the comment section. And if you want more true crime stories that go beyond the surface, breaking down the psychology behind them, make sure you like, subscribe, and stay connected to Psychology of True Crime. Because understanding these stories is how we prevent it from repeating itself. Thank you for your time.